A while back, somebody suggested I use Light Scheduler in place of Big Timer for automating my lights at sunset and sunrise. So today I thought I would play around with that and see how those two compare. We'll do this in Node-RED using the Light Scheduler node, and I will look at the Big Timer node, which I'm currently using. So let's jump over to the computer and get started. All right, so let's jump on into Node-RED where we're going to do our work today. And we'll jump over to my light actions flow here. First things first, you need to make sure that if you're going to use Light Scheduler, the Light Scheduler node, that you have it installed and available in your node list over here. And the way you do that is you click on this over here and you click on Manage Palette. And under Manage Palette, you're going to have the ability to search for and install nodes. So if I search for Light Scheduler, you'll see that pops up this Node-RED Contrib Light Scheduler, and that is the one that we're using today. Now, this is the Install tab in Node-RED, and this is the Nodes tab. So if I search for it here, which I already know I have, it's already installed. There is an update to this as well, where you can update it to 0.017. So if you do see that, there may be new features that you want to include. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. It's going to restart over Node-RED to complete the update. That's fine. So updating is just as simple as clicking the button and doing a quick restart. So let me get that updated so that we have the latest version. To restart Node-RED, we actually have to go back over to Supervisor, and we have to find Node-RED in our list of add-ons and restart it. And it'll take a couple of seconds for that to happen. Okay, Node-RED's restarted now, so let's go back into Node-RED, and we can just go from here now. Go to the web UI. And then we'll go back into our lights flow here. And let me just double check. I'm going to go back to Manage Palette and make sure that looks good from what we just updated. And we're good. And it shows you these three nodes where we're using this right now. You've got it installed. And what I'm doing today is I'm kind of comparing Big Timer, which is what I'm currently using for my lighting, to Light Scheduler. As I mentioned, someone had said, well, why not use Light Scheduler for doing the light controls? So if I look at Big Timer here, this is how I have my current Big Timer set up to turn things on and off. And the options for Big Timer are pretty extensive. So I named it sunset to sunrise. So my on time is sunset, my off time is sunrise. And it sends out a message, and Light Scheduler does this as well, but it sends out a message and tells you that you can interpret with a switch node and do something with. So the on offset, I've set to minus 20 minutes. So it'll happen 20 minutes before sunset, and then 10 minutes after sunrise is when the off message gets sent. And this is based on your latitude and longitude, which I've zeroed out for the video. But you'll put in your local latitude, longitude that you want to use here. Now, if for whatever reason you want it to do something based on somebody else's longitude or latitude, then you can put that in here. It's independent of your Home Assistant setup. So this is very nice if you want to activate some sort of thing based on a light level or a sunrise level or whatever in a different area of the world. All right. You can do MQTT with this. Again, on and off messages are specified here, and that's what gets sent down the line. You can send all kinds of days and months. This is special days of the year you can do special things on. We won't go into a lot of detail because we're just talking about this versus the Light Scheduler. You can also set days of the week, months of the year. You can set specific things here, such as suspending the schedule, randomizing, banning odd days or banning even days. You can output it at startup, so it checks the status of everything at startup and does what it's supposed to do. All that stuff, right? So that's how I'm using Big Timer. Just to recap here, at sunset, I turned it on 20 minutes before sunset. That's an offset. And then for the off message, it's sunrise plus 10 minutes based on my current location. And then from there, I interpret that with a switch. The on and off payload go to different outputs here, and then lights go on or lights go off. That's as simple as the Big Timer is for this particular usage. Now let's compare that to Light Scheduler. And with Light Scheduler, it's a little bit different story. Light Scheduler's configuration, and you'll notice here I've got quite a few little setups going on here. And even with BigTimer, I had one for my outside lights and I had one for inside lights. The reason I do that is it gets darker inside. As the sun drops, the inside of the house gets darker before the outside does. And so I need it to be lit up in the house. I want to turn some of my inside lights on a little bit earlier than I do the outside lights. And one of the reasons I state that and why it's important is I actually have a light scheduler for the inside lights and I have a light scheduler for the outside lights. And so let's go into the scheduler configuration. This is where it differs from BigTimer. This section right here, this whole GUI UI based scheduling calendar looking window thing. So I'll go through one step at a time right here. The name is what we want to call it. So this one I say turn the lights on at plus 6 degrees. What that means is whenever the sun is plus 6 degrees above the horizon, that's when I want to turn this particular set of lights on or do this action. And by the way, Light Scheduler is called Light Scheduler because you use it with lights primarily. However, you can do other things with it. You don't have to just use it for lights. You can do it for any kind of automation that you want to run based on either a schedule or on the position of the sun in the sky. Okay, so what we've done here, or what I've done here for this particular node is I've set it so that the lights will come on anywhere from 4 o'clock until midnight every day of the week. And the way you do that, I'll just demonstrate up here, is you take and you click on it and you can drag down, or you can just click little sections like this and put it where you want to. This is very helpful if you're running it as a schedule only, because then you can make things turn on and off based on the schedule. And to get rid of these, I just click them again. If I can get on that line. So I'll just click all these off because I don't want them on here. And one of the things I learned, I'll get to a little more detail in a minute, is how you set this up is going to determine what happens for the sun the sun angle switching on and off part of it. But for basic scheduling, this is the UI that you would use. You just, like I said, you just pull and mark things that you want to have the on payload sent. And it notes here that anywhere you mark a schedule, for example, right here, it's going to be the on payload, which means it's going to send whatever you have in that on payload. And then when you have it in the off payload, it's going to send whatever you want in the off payload, depending on a couple of other settings we're going to get to. Now you can set randomness in minutes. So if you say turn on at 10 o'clock here, or 10:30 or 10:15, and by the way, these are in 15-minute increments. One of the things I don't like is I can't really see the actual time, but if you really look at it closely, you can see that these are in 15-minute chunks. So if I go up here, that now becomes 10, and then it's 11, looks like 11:15. And actually, it looks like it's a little bit more granular than I thought. It's really hard to tell what that actual number is. So it's best just to go even, 15:30 on the hour or whatever. So anyway, if I set this to 10 o'clock and I want this to come on at 10 o'clock, and I set this randomizer to 10 minutes, it's going to start this anywhere from 10 minutes before to 10 minutes after the time I schedule that. And it'll do the same thing for the off payload. It'll turn it on or off either 10 minutes before or after, up to 10 minutes. Up to 10 minutes. It'll do it anywhere in between there. So it randomly picks a number up to 10 minutes to do that. All right, so let's get rid of that. Let's set this back to 0. And you notice that I have this starting at 4 o'clock. And the reason I do that here on this one is I want my inside lights to come on whenever the sun angle is 6 degrees above the horizon. They call that the golden hour. That's when the sun is setting just on the horizon. And they call it the golden hour because that's the best time to take photos, apparently. At least that's what I read. And I want to send a payload of on for on. and I want to send a payload of off or off. In this case, I'm only using the on payload, and I'll show you that in a minute. And then I want to change this from schedule only to only when dark. And this is going to make this fire only when it's dark outside or 6 degrees above the horizon, and when it's triggered. When you change the output here to when state changes, it will look and see when it hits this plus 6 degrees, that is the time it will send the appropriate payload. And in my case, when it's above 6 degrees in my area, I want it to turn on. And there's a little bit of thinking about how you do this. Because if I set this to 8 o'clock p.m. in my area for the summertime, and this gets above 6 degrees, it's not going to trigger this because it will already have passed that whenever the on payload should be sent. I hope that makes sense. Let me try to say it another way. You have to have this block set for any time you want this to turn on, and you have to set it, if you want to set it and forget it, it needs to be the earliest time in the day, and that's typically winter, that in the winter, that the sun will be setting to that level. So I know that it could be as early as 4:30 p.m. in the wintertime for it to be here. And so I want to make sure that I've covered all my bases all the way from 4 o'clock to midnight. And I could technically, set this to maybe 10:30. Sometimes in the summertime, the sun doesn't get to that angle until 7 or 8 p.m. local time. So I want to have this whole block, and I just set it up to midnight because I'm going to leave it on anyway. So I set that whole block of time to make sure it's covered within the 6 degree golden hour time. And so what's going to happen now, and also I set show sun elevation in status, which will then show it over here what my sun angle is. So if you're debugging, you can kind of look at that. You can choose, and let me make this easy for you to see. You can choose from here the different threshold levels for the sun angle, all the way from plus 10 degrees all the way down to minus 18. And so minus 18 degrees below the horizon, that's 18 degrees below the horizon, is going to be astronomical dawn. And then 10 degrees above is just way up in the sky. And then you've got golden hour, sunset, sunrise, and then nautical. And I realize you can't see astronomical down below here, but there is minus 18 for astronomical dawn. So you can set that at any point in there, the sun angle can be triggered. And again, make sure that you've covered your if you want it to turn on, the on payload's only going to happen if you have this set to when trigger or when state changes and the sun angle gets to this point, because this combined with this is going to be when the actual trigger occurs. If this has it marked off as being the on payload, then it's going to send that on payload. Okay, so that is how I do just turning on lights. And then I turn these off through the Arming the alarm system. These are all inside lights. They'll go off later based on other stuff. I just want to turn them on. And if we get rid of the debug stuff here, you can see that I'm only using one of these two paths out of the switch. And so for the switch part of it, this light scheduler node, as you remember, is sending an on and an off from itself over to the next node, which in this case is the switch node. I could potentially just remove the switch node here and just go straight to the call service to turn the lights on, because it'll trigger and send just an output and then calls the service. But I'd rather have more control over it and interpret the output from it. So on and off are the two options that I gave it. So if it reaches, or if it gets an on, the switch gets an on payload, it's going to go out slot 1. And if it gets an off payload, it's going to go out slot 2 or path 2. And looking here, you can see that the on payload here is going to fire whenever all those conditions in the light scheduler are set. And then it's going to shoot off as well. And I'm doing the notification strictly just to see how this is playing out. I want to make sure it's working the way it's supposed to. And so I have a notification to push over to tell me when this is firing off. I will remove that once I'm comfortable that this is working correctly, but it's a good debugging step. So this turns all my lights on the inside. Now, the next one I want to show is lights on at sunset and lights off at sunset. And I have a lot of this disconnected because I was playing around and testing with it, but I discovered something overnight last night that caused the lights to turn off outside at midnight rather than at sunrise this morning. And if you remember this, the window here, this section has to be filled in for the time you want things to be receiving the on payload. So if I want the lights to be on, I need to have this whole thing set. And what I think happened at midnight is it re-triggered it for some reason and determined that the lights were, this was not filled in. So last night I basically had part of this missing here. I just removed part of Wednesday and it turned off at midnight. This was not completely filled in. So I learned my lesson and I've completely filled in 24/7, all of this stuff so that all it's controlled by is the sun angle and nothing else. Now, if you did a minute by minute selection here, if you did it minutely, it would go in there and evaluate that every minute and turn the lights on. But if you're just doing when state changes, the state change is going to be this threshold level here. And then it will turn it on or off based on that. So in my testing, my limited testing on this, because I'm doing this comparison between the two, what I determined based on what I saw last night was I needed to fill it out, number one. And then I went over and I picked a couple of places in the world to set the latitude and longitude. And by the way, under globals here, this is where you set the latitude and longitude. This is someplace over in the ocean west of the United States because the sun was coming up and I wanted to trigger this to see what it would do with the sun coming up. Very interesting. Okay, so anyway, I tested this by doing that and found that it works the way it's supposed to. In addition, I also found that I'm able to use the off output here and the on output. And the only way this works is if you want to keep the lights on and off at the same degree angle. If you want to do what I was doing with the big timer, so for example, sunset minus 20 minutes is when I want the lights to come on. So 20 minutes before, or 10 minutes after sunrise. If you want to have that granularity, you're going to have to create another node. And I did that here for testing as well. I want the lights to turn off. I want them to turn off, and I had it set here to 1 degree above the horizon. I want that to turn on there because I want it to be a little bit lighter outside before my outside lights turn off. And so in order to do that with the light schedule, you have to create another node that has a different threshold value on it. But I'm going to play around with just leaving it here for now and just turning on and off. And again, I have all my lights connected. I'll turn them on or off based on this one single node. And then I will send a pushover alert telling me that it occurs. And so what are some things that I like or dislike about the light scheduler versus Big Timer? Big Timer has a lot of options, maybe maybe more options than you really need for simple stuff like this. And someone's going to tell me there's another node out there that will do Big Timer stuff in a less complicated way, but it's still simple to use. This light scheduler, on the other hand, with the GUI is very nice. And it's a very, very nice if you're doing strictly scheduling and you're scheduling things in different times, because then you can use the GUI and you can take a look at the GUI and see exactly when things are going to turn on and off without worrying about the logic of the sun. What makes it more complicated when I start talking about this GUI part here is knowing you have to fill in these sections here in order for stuff to happen. And in my mind, it's counterintuitive that I would take a block of time and fill it in as an on time when I don't really want it to come on until later based on the sun angle. So it's a little bit counterintuitive. It's a little bit counterintuitive to have this have to be filled out for an entire day just to have the lights turn on or off and the lights to stay on if it elapses over midnight or something like that. For me, it would be better to have something here that would say, check a box saying 24/7 or only when state changes, ignore the schedule up here or something like that. So that part makes it a little confusing. And I've done some limited testing on this over the last few days, and it's okay, but we'll let it run for a little bit longer and see if this really does work the way I think it's supposed to based on what I'm seeing. And you can read the webpage on this. And it kind of talks a little bit about it, but doesn't go into detail about that scheduler versus the angle and whatnot. But I think it's going to be okay. So again, I think for scheduling things on a GUI basis, this will be excellent. If you're doing scheduling only, if you want to do something like on-off sunrise to sunset, this might be a better option for you for BigTimer's use case. One of the examples they show on the light scheduler page is how to use this in kind of a motion scenario. So you can, again, these things, when I show them, are very simple. You can extend them to do a lot of different things. But in this case, you could use a flow to force lights to turn on when motion is detected, only when it's dark. So in this case, you would have a motion sensor, some sort of trigger for 5 minutes. It would send it over here to the light scheduler, turn it on, only if it's dark. And you could set that up in the settings I showed you in the light scheduler node. One of the other interesting things is you can set some of these overrides. So you can set an on or an off, an auto, stop, or trigger, and a light only. And that's how these work here. Auto removes any overrides that you have. So that's how you normally want to run it, is let it run in auto mode. And then schedule only ignores the light level control. Light only will ignore schedule and care about light level. And that's interesting because that's not an option that you can get over here in the node itself for output. You have to set that from the inject node. So you could actually do what I said before and set this to light only. And then of course the stop keyword can be used to suspend all output from the node, so it won't run anymore at all. So you have your options here, and it's interesting that light level is here now. But this video is more about comparing BigTimer to Light Scheduler. And I think each has its place. I think if you want to be super simple, you're just going to be best using BigTimer. If you want to do the other stuff with the scheduling UI, that's best for light schedulers use. All right, so I hope this was helpful. I hope it answered the questions for the viewer who was asking about Light Scheduler. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button. If you have any questions, of course, Discord and comments down below. And we'll see you on the next one.